Hi, my name is Travis Rector, and I'm a professor of astronomy at the University of Alaska Anchorage, and thank you for taking the time to listen to my talk. Now, in addition to being a professor at the University of Alaska, I'm also the chair of the Sustainability Committee for the American Astronomical Society. And one of our charges for the Society is to look into ways to reduce the carbon footprint of our profession. And since travel is one of the primary sources of our carbon footprint, we've been looking for the last few years at virtual meetings to see ways that we can do that. Virtual meetings roughly have about 1% or less the carbon footprint of face-to-face. So this is a technology that we've been looking at for a while, and now thanks to COVID-19, we are now taking it more seriously. So virtual meetings have been around for a while, and so what I'd like to do is just talk with you about the ways that we're looking at using them. Now, when it comes to talking about virtual meetings, there's often a lot of resistance to the idea of doing this. People often point out that face-to-face meetings are really important for establishing and maintaining collaborations, or for the informal social interactions that occur in and outside of the meeting. And there are some astronomers who have argued that because we have a relatively small footprint, that we shouldn't worry about it because we're a small profession, though I certainly don't agree with that mindset. So when it comes to face-to-face meetings, there are things that are very important about them, but we should also take an honest look at the downsides of face-to-face meetings as well. Not the least of which is the discomfort and inconvenience of travel, and also the expense. So face-to-face meetings have several downsides. One is they're very expensive, not only for participants, but also for conference organizers. And in particular, these conferences open up our professional society to financial risk. If enough people don't attend our meetings, the AAS is at risk of losing money, whereas for virtual conferencing, that is less of a factor. Now, another thing about face-to-face meetings is that we have a very limited amount of time. Usually you only have 3 to 4 days, and there may be dozens, if not hundreds of people that you'd like to talk with in that time. So there's just simply not enough time to talk with all the people you'd like to talk with, and not only that, to go to the talks that you'd like to do as well. And financially, whether it be because of your job requires you to be present, or your health, or your family life, there's a lot of reasons why people aren't able to participate in a AAS meeting. And so in our largest meetings, we have over 3,000 participants, but our society as a whole is over 10,000 members. So at any given time, less than a third of our society is participating in our face-to-face meetings. And so that's a lot of people who aren't benefiting from those meetings. So one of the things that's important to keep in mind when decision-making about face-to-face versus virtual is that if you're at the face-to-face meeting, you've cleared quite a few hurdles to enable you to be there. So in other words, if you're there, the system works for you, and it's important in our decision-making to think about the people who aren't able to be there for one of the reasons that I've talked about. So virtual meetings have quite a bit of upside to them, not the least of which is that it enables you to participate in more conferences. I'm fortunate if I'm able to go to 2, maybe 3 conferences a year, but certainly living in Alaska, that means a lot of travel, a lot of time away from family and from my job. And so it can be very difficult to make that happen. But imagine a future where you could attend maybe 5 or 10 conferences or even more. And not only that, maybe you could just participate at the level that you'd like. Think of the conferences you've seen where maybe 1 or 2 sessions interest you, but you've decided not to attend because it just simply isn't worth the expense or the hassle. Now, another advantage of virtual meetings is the flexibility. You can watch talks when you want. If you didn't understand what someone said, you can pause it and watch it again. And you can also spread the experience over a longer period of time. Think of those 3 to 4 day face-to-face meetings where it's just been a whirlwind and you don't even know what happened. Here's an opportunity for you to watch a talk, think about it, and then maybe reach out to the speaker and be able to have a better conversation. Now, another thing that's important to keep in mind is there are quite a few barriers that do prevent people from attending. And so when people say, well, I don't want to give up face-to-face meetings because of how important they are in establishing collaborations, it's important to think about the people that you didn't meet at a conference because they weren't able to attend. And so that includes people who are at primarily teaching institutions, where getting away from their teaching duties may be difficult, or if you have other obligations professionally. And also if you have a young family, maybe it's hard for you to be away for a long period of time. So virtual meetings offer a promise of better participation, and especially for diversity and equity. And I'll also mention it improves the possibility of the public participating. You can have public talks recorded that anyone in the world could watch. So these are important things to consider as well. And not the least of which, and this is something I think about every time I step out the door, is that being away from my family is just one of the hardest things for me to do. So I love the idea of being able to participate online and then being able to spend the rest of the day with the people that I love. So this last summer, the American Astronomical Society held its first virtual meeting online. This was in response to COVID-19. And we only had a few months to think about how it would be done. And for the most part, it followed a traditional conference format. We basically did all the things that we normally do face-to-face, but did it online. And afterwards, we did a survey. Now, one thing I'll mention is that even though it was rushed, the conference was an outstanding success, for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is in participation. Normally, about 500 people participate in a summer AAS meeting, and this year we had over 1,200. So we more than doubled the number of people who could attend. So it begs the question, well, why did more people attend? And so there's a variety of factors, but one of the things we noticed in our survey is that quite a few people actually pay out of their own pocket to attend a conference. And so a normal face-to-face conference for the AAS may cost $1,000 or possibly $2,000 for someone to participate. And here we were able to get more participants, even if they were paying out of pocket. Now for this conference, we were charging over $200 to participate. So just imagine how we could get that number, the number of participants up if we're able to get those costs even further down. Now, we did a comparison between the in-person face-to-face experience and the virtual. And the good news is that the majority of our participants found that the online talks were as good or better than in person. Now, many people felt like the poster sessions was not as good, and that reflects in part some technical difficulties that we had with online delivery of poster sessions. And overall, people found the experience to be about the same as being online. Now, the most encouraging result is that the far majority of participants said they're likely or very likely to participate in a virtual meeting in the future. Now, in doing this conference, we followed the traditional format, but it's important to keep in mind that there's a lot of different ways to do things. So, for example, the nearly carbon neutral model is an innovative way of doing an online conference in a non-traditional format. So when it comes to talking about doing these conferences online, there's a lot of resistance because people are reluctant to give up what they know. So change is scary, but change can be good. And one of the challenges is helping people see how we can do things differently in a way that's better. An analogy a friend of mine once used that I really like is that virtual conferencing is sort of like what television was in the early days. People didn't know how to do a television show, so they just did radio shows on TV. But as the technology improved and people better learned how to use it, then television was able to fulfill its promise. And I think that's where we are with virtual conferencing. We just don't know yet the best ways to use it. So in the next 10 years, we can expect to see tremendous improvements, not only in the technology that we use for virtual conferencing, but also just understanding what formats work best and have a diversity of formats that can work for a variety of reasons, like what we're doing for this meeting. So one of the things I'm really excited about with virtual conferencing is that changes can make astronomy more inclusive, more productive scientifically, and just simply better. Well, I hope you've enjoyed my talk, and if you'd like to reach out to me, this is my email address, and I'd be more than happy to talk with you about what we've learned in our work at the AAS and beyond. So thank you for listening.